Hey guys, I just wanted to offer just a quick cautionary tale on this episode as well. And I apologize that this is several weeks that we've had some sensitive content. And while I think the vast majority of you are adults that listen to this, you may be driving down the road and have a child, but listening in the car. We don't want to offend anyone. But the realities are, as they were when we talked with Mark Sorsby a couple of weeks ago. This week's topic is about broken people, and we live in a broken world. And part of that, the way that brokenness manifests itself, is in addictions, and particularly this week and the next week, we will be talking about pornography addiction. It is an increasingly sensitive issue, an increasing problem. People ask, what's this got to do with church planting? This has plenty to do with church planting. When you are ministering, when you're planting a church, the likelihood that you're going to encounter this are higher in a church plant because of the people that you attract. You're seen as a open community as opposed to a closed community. And so that is why people who are broken tend to be more attracted to church plants. That's not a bad thing. The church is a hospital for the sick, as they say. And of course, we are supposed to, when you're doing church planting, you're going to be in the community much more. And the likelihood that you'll probably be ministering to 10 times more people outside of your church than you will inside a church when you're doing a church plant, because you're just missional. And you understand that God is sending us. So, again, today's topic is about pornography. Our guest, Bob Hunter, Dr. Bob Hunter, does use language related to pornography. And so we just want to kind of give you that warning there. I hope you have a fantastic day. Like and subscribe, if you will. And just a reminder that my book and Desmond's book is available at Amazon or anywhere you buy books online. Or you can also go to book.revitalizedtoplant.com and get it for a discount. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Again, if you'd like and subscribe, we have a lot of listeners, but we need people to subscribe and review it as well. Thanks.
We have a whole generation of young people who've been sexually traumatized because they've been exposed to pornography at a very, very early age. And this is sexual trauma. Let's just, say what it is. So what you have then is, a lot of men who are not healed themselves. They're broken inside, and they have a very distorted view of themselves and human sexuality. And here's the thing, until they get healed, those inner conflicts will reign, and the emotional pain will drive them to find comfort in pornography. And there's no real comfort found in porn. It actually takes you deeper into your pain. But the emotional healing component often isn't addressed, and it needs to be. A man needs to get underneath all of those past traumas, the pain points. And when he does, he suddenly becomes empowered in the present, and he's able to recognize some of the reasons why he acts, thinks, and behaves in certain ways. So the emotional healing process is just absolutely critical.
Marcus Aurelius said, "What we do in life echoes through eternity." What is your life echoing through eternity? Welcome to Echoes Through Eternity with Dr. Jeffrey Skinner. Our mission is to inspire, engage, and encourage leaders from across the globe to plant missional churches and be servant leaders. So join us and hear the stories of servant leaders reverberating lives as God echoes them through eternity. Brought to you by Missional Church Planting and Leadership Development and Dynamic Church Planting International.
Welcome into Echoes Through Eternity. I am your host, Dr. Jeffrey D. Skinner. What is God echoing through your life today? I am joined in the studio today by a repeat guest, Dr. Bob Hunter. He was on one of our higher performing episodes, if not highest performing episodes that we've had. And it was on the subject of ministering to men. And so he and I were talking offline, having a conversation again, and just talking about some of the metrics of his podcast or his episode. And so he mentioned that He had another topic that he'd be interested in talking about that he feels like is part of the front lines of ministry, and that is the addiction to pornography. Last week, we interviewed a gentleman by the name of Mark Sorsby, who had written a book on forgiving the nightmare, and was abuse and sexual abuse and physical abuse and everything that he went through. And what what statistics tell you is that pornography and sexual abuse, there's an inextricable link between those two. And so we got Bob on today to talk about that. And then before we get to Bob, I did want to address just a quick question that I've had from some of our listeners out there wanting to know, what does this got to do with church planting? What does, you have so many different guests on. And, well, number one, the show has never been about promoting me as a personality. I'm 56 years old. I'm not trying to be famous. Okay. I don't need fame. I don't have a face for fame. It's just not me. I don't seek that. This was all about lifting others up, right? Echoing the voices of the people that God is using that serve in anonymity. This is a huge world that we live in. And there are people that are serving God faithfully every day that we don't know about. And so I want to lift those voices up so that they get a platform, so that it shines a light on these things. Not everything God does is a Asbury revival, right? We love revivals. We love Asbury. We love the public things God does, but God does a lot in secret. Whatever we see on the surface of God is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that's happening underneath. So that's first and foremost what this podcast is about. Now, how is it related to church planting? When you plant a church, you're going to be ministering to people. The days of the attractional church, at least for now in this season, is over.
It's over.
Right?
It's over.
So you're not going to plant a church and throw open the doors and just everybody come. Besides that, the attractional church model was never a healthy model because it resembled more of the Tower of Babel mentality, where we're growing empires and growing towers to show our own greatness as opposed to demonstrating the greatness of God, right? And so that was the attractional church model. I understood it. We want to get them in the door so we can get them saved. But the reality is in today's world, you're not going to out Disney. I don't care how big your church budget is. 12 Stone Church has 17,000 people on any given Sunday or any given week that they minister to. They can't out Disney. They don't have a budget big enough to compete with Disney or even Six Flags here. You can't compete with that entertainment. So if you're trying to create entertainment within your church to attract people, that's not what it's about. So church planting is missional. And missional is not a church ecclesiology. Missional is the theology of God. God was a God who sent himself. From the very beginning in Genesis, he sent himself to us, and then he continues to give himself away, to send himself over and over, and then sent his son, and then sends us. And then one of the last acts, he breathes his breath of life into us and sends us out. And so as we're going out, in today's culture, we're not just preaching Jesus, we're preaching, how can Jesus help you? How can Jesus heal you? And so we have to be equipped. And these are people like Bob and the stories of Mark and John Comstock that we had last week, the discipleshipplace.org. These are Christians that are resourcing churches. They're people that are ministering to the people of God. They're on the front lines. And when you plant your church, these are the people that's going to be walking through your doors. In fact, before they walk through your door, you should be meeting them in the community. You'll be talking with these people in private. And today's topic is one of those topics that is extremely delicate. Not a lot of people want to talk about it because it's kind of the third rail. It's kind of a sensitive topic. But simultaneously, Bob and I were talking before, literally all hell breaks loose when you start talking about this topic. The enemy does not want this brought to light. When you look at the examples in the New Testament, when the disciples or Jesus exposed the demons and the demonic activity, it was a battle. And they were screaming and yelling. They didn't go quietly into the night. It is a noisy process when you cast out demons. And I'm talking demons in a not necessarily literal sense here. Don't think I'm going charismatic. But anyway, so that's the topic today. So that kind of contextualizes the podcast for those of you who may be questioning, how is this related to church planting? Whether it be Rondi Smith at Red Stop Ministries rescuing the ladies that are coming in out of sex trafficking, which again is directly related to pornography use, or as Bob ministering to men and young boys. I've got an 18-year-old son. I've got a nephew who's 21 now. At the age of 9, they were exposed to pornography. Not from me, through their phone or through the TV, and it doesn't have to be cable channels. This is, it's advertised openly in our culture. And then this is communicated to the young women out there, and it creates mental illness such as bulimia or anorexia and things like that. So it directly reflects the self-image of young ladies. I've got a daughter, and she doesn't have a Barbie figure. She's a pretty young lady, and she's a beautiful young lady. She loves God with all her heart, soul, mind, and strength. But she suffers from a body image because not disorder, but just a lack of confidence in her body image, because she doesn't fit that model that the world is lifting up as this is what you need to look like. And she's a pretty young lady, like I say, but she doesn't have that Barbie figure. She's an athlete. She does softball and she does tennis. So anyway, with all that being said today, we'll get back to our host here. I didn't mean to go on a 10-minute monologue here, but I just wanted to contextualize things for everybody out there so they understand what our purpose is here. Number one is not building a brand for me. I'm not seeking human accolades. I don't need that. Don't want that. I want the accolades of God. And then the second thing is that this is lifting up the voices of others and want to show what God is doing. Ultimately, that is the goal, is to highlight the things that God is doing, not just in the daylight, but in the dark of night where the demons work. God is working there too. God exists in some of the darkest places. Jesus went to hell after he died in order to preach, in order to send the gospel to those that had not yet heard it. So anyway, Bob, great to have you again, brother. Sorry I went too long.
That's all right. Hey, it's good to be back, but I think I'm on the wrong podcast. I received an email invitation to interview, and the topic was Bob Hunter ministering to men with pork addiction. That was an unintentional mistake on your part. But I thought to myself, you know what? If that's the reality, I'm out, because I have a bona fide addiction to bacon. Okay. I had bacon for breakfast this morning. I mean, bacon and manhood go together. Just, hand in hand. Are you with me?
I'm with you, brother. And look, now I've known some pastors that look like they have a pork addiction, but and at one time I was 300 pounds. I must have had some type of addiction to pork or something.
Right.
But anyway, even broccoli is good with bacon. It's just one of those things. So.
Hey, bacon's good all by itself, my brother. Oh, just love me some bacon. But anyway, it's good to be back. And no, we're going to talk about, porn addiction. I'm just, honored to be a return guest. And let's just dive right into this. I think you've outlined the problem quite nicely, and you've set this up well. Basically, we are dealing with an epidemic of porn consumption in the church and in society. There's almost no distinguishable difference in terms of the level of consumption. And the church needs to be a bigger part of the solution. I think we all agree. That's not even in question. And we haven't been, unfortunately. In too many instances, there's been silence, deep, deep silence. And we haven't delivered redemption and restoration at the level that we need to. And in some cases, the church has been a hindrance because of the guilt and shame associated with this particular problem. It's like our dirty little secret that we don't want to come out and really talk about it in the open. So in some cases, the church has been a hindrance, but in those cases where the church has been bold enough to bring men into recovery, what I have found is that our approach to sexual addiction and recovery is often one-dimensional. And what is needed is a multi-pronged attack plan. So I'm going to describe a possible way forward. Again, there are many different ways to approach this, but in the years that I've been dealing with sexual addiction and I have been trained on the subject, I'm no expert, but I did for several years sit under Dr. Ted Roberts, who was the founder of Pure Desire Ministries. and the Conquer series, which is, a gold standard in educating men and treating men in the context of the local church. So I have the advantage of all the things that were imparted to me by Dr. Roberts, who is a certified sex therapist. And I just have 30 years of having done it and helping men get free. So I've observed some things that I think might be helpful, and I'd like to put them out there for us to consider. So I'm really, really honored to be here. And Jeff, what you're doing is this is good work. This is frontline stuff. There aren't a lot of people that really want to tackle these tough topics. And so I'm glad to be here and to partner with you.
Well, I appreciate that. But yeah, let's dive right in here and let's get started. So what would you say would be the first, when, let's say someone recognizes that porn, because let's be honest, the culture normalizes it, right? The news, I've heard mainstream media news and mainstream media personalities laugh at porn and just kind of casually mention it. I remember, now this is 25 years ago, I first gotten into ministry, serving in the local church, not as a lead pastor at this point. This is when I was not yet ordained. I was still serving as an associate at the time. And it was a marriage retreat. And the topic came up at marriage retreat of using pornography within the context of marriage. And it was a literal question. I mean, as if from a Christian leader within a church. Hey, so we recognize that pornography is not a good thing, and this is before the internet. This is when it was VHS, right? Not before streaming services or anything. It's okay to use it within the context of marriage, right? And just the speaker's face went white. I mean, just because there was this level of normalization, and this was 25 years ago. Just let's fast forward to today. It's everywhere, right? Let's assume we're going to take the approach that pornography is bad, right? We're just going to say, no matter what people want to normalize, I can normalize murder. It's wrong. Period.
Yeah. Well, what I would
we're
say
going
to
to take that stance.
It's very interesting how, I feel a bit of a shift, and pornography consumption has been declared a public health concern in many states. So what I'm saying to you is that while, yes, it has been normalized and ignored, and, that's just things that men do. Men like to look because they're visual and all that. Yes, there is that component. However, the world is catching up to this. And we're seeing that, people in the secular realm have awakened to this issue and have recognized it as a public health concern. I know that there are many who are in the field of counseling and sexual recovery, addiction therapies, etc. That their approach is purely secular, but they recognize that this is a problem. And I wonder, it's really refreshing to me to see that development. And in some cases, they're beating us at their own game, Jeff, at our own game. We should be the ones on the front line. And the church is not. Quite often, the church is not a part of the solution. We're part of the problem. And so we need to be a bigger part of the solution. And so hopefully this discussion will, catalyze some interest and, hopefully facilitate some healing. We need to get in the game and have a more redemptive presence. So some things, where to begin with this conversation? Well, years ago, I did a workshop on this topic, and I called it Cracking the Code. So cracking the code to porn addiction, particularly as it pertains to men. Though women, this is becoming a very, very, it's a growing problem among women as well. So I'd like our listeners to consider 5 parts or 5 components of that plan, of that multi-pronged attack plan. And at the end, I'll kind of wrap it all up and put a bow on it. But the first component would be education. There's a whole lot of science here that needs to be addressed. And I believe the science is bringing those in the secular realm to a better understanding of just how detrimental this is to our sexual health.
Christian leaders everywhere are talking about Revitalize the Plant.
Written by Drs. Desmond Barrett and Jeffrey D. Skinner, Revitalize to Plant is more than a philosophical approach to church planting and revitalization. The authors have experienced the crucible of leading in the trenches of ministry. It's gritty, practical, and most of all, recasts our vision and understanding of church planting and revitalization. Revitalize to Plant, now available on Amazon or revitalizetoplant.com. That's revitalizetoplant.com, the last resource you'll need to bring new life to your church.
And so what I tell guys when they've come to me, and many have over the years, I say, look, you're going to need to go to school. Education is very important on this issue. And you need to understand that porn is a very powerful drug that hijacks your brain. It produces compulsive behavior and addictive qualities. And education will help you unpack the problem. So if you understand the problem, you have a greater chance of fixing it. And a lot of guys are just so naive here. They just think to themselves, well, I have a little moral problem. I need to confess it. No, you not only have a moral problem, you have a chemical problem. You have a physiological problem. There's a whole science that goes on that needs to be addressed. And guys need to understand it neurochemically, what's happening. And for a lot of guys, they just think to themselves, porn is just something guys do and I file it away. But no, it's really not just that. It's so much bigger. And because we're talking about the nature of addiction, we're talking about, dopamine levels in the brain and how men recover, why they relapse, your brain chemistry and how that affects behavior. So understanding that whole biochemistry component is really, really helpful. So I just, like to say to guys, hey, right up front, look, you're going to need to go to school. You're going to need to understand yourself. You're going to need to understand your arousal template. And just to give you an example of that, there's a lot of talk about arousal template. This all falls in the education category. I had a guy that was a parent in one of my youth groups many years ago. And he came to me one day and he says, Pastor Bob, I see you like to do all these group games and that they involve physical contact and kids are banging bodies up against each other. And as a youth sponsor, sometimes I'm inadvertently in contact with young females. And he said to me, you know what? I have to take myself out of the game because I'm totally wrecked for the next 2 days. I cannot handle contact with young girls. It destroys me because I'm getting aroused. And there was something disturbing about that, but also brilliant. He understood his arousal template and he was able to do something about it. And so this falls into the category of education. We need to go back to school. We need to understand what arouses us sexually and why that's happening. Why is that chemical response? Why does that occur? And maybe in understanding it, we can make sure that we're out of those situations. And to this man's credit, he took himself out of the situation and there wasn't a problem. And he was getting help in other areas, which was awesome. So the educational component often is neglected. It's often neglected. Nobody wants to go back to school. It's a lot of work. Okay. It's a lot of understanding. But nonetheless, education it's vitally important. And so it's a component. It's a part of that multi-pronged attack plan that I'd like to propose.
Yeah. You talk about arousal. What was the term you used?
The arousal template.
Mm-hmm. Trigger, I think, is another term.
Trigger, it would be another way to describe it.
What is it? What are your triggers? And so avoid those triggers. I remember having a conversation with a guy one time. It was around pornography, actually. And so he was confessing to me that they had a problem. And I said, look, dude, I said, here's the situation. I said, if you're afraid of heights, are you going to go to the top of a building, walk to the edge of that building, and then look off the edge of that building? Well, no, that'd be stupid. I'm afraid of heights. So it's the same thing with your triggers, right? If you know that something is a trigger for you, stay away from it. If I'm an alcoholic, I'm not going to put beer in my refrigerator. If I'm not going to go hang out in a bar with a bunch of friends, if cigarettes are a trigger for me to smoking, I'm not going to go hang out with a place with a bunch of guys that are smoking because it's going to trigger me. Or maybe it's eating. And so they have to figure out alternative ways. There's a great book out there called Atomic Habits. And it talks about, and I can't remember the name of the author off the top of my head. It's a very popular book, though. But he talks about those small changes, and I think that's probably where you're heading is begin making these small changes here.
Yep, exactly. And again, this is the educational component. So it's encouraging men to understand the problem. You have to unpack the problem, understand your body, understand the physiological aspects that are in play. And once you understand it, now you have a chance. Now you have a chance to address the issue and feel maybe a little bit more empowered because you understand what's going on neurochemically in your brain. And so the educational component, again, often neglected, but very, very important. Well, the second component is emotional healing. And there's a lot here. We've known this. It's very difficult to address. So a lot could be said. But there's a whole range of damaged emotions that can drive a man to seek comfort in porn. It's unresolved pain points from the past, childhood traumas, perhaps a father wound, a mother wound. Maybe you're the son or the daughter of a narcissistic parent. And there's all kinds of things that are going on neurologically. We have a whole generation of young people who've been sexually traumatized because they've been exposed to pornography at a very, very early age. And this is sexual trauma. Let's just, say what it is. So what you have then is, a lot of men who are not healed themselves. They're broken inside and they have a very distorted view of themselves and human sexuality. And here's the thing, until they get healed, those inner conflicts will reign and the emotional pain will drive them to find comfort in pornography. And there's no real comfort found in porn. It actually takes you deeper into your pain. But the emotional healing component often isn't addressed, and it needs to be. A man needs to get underneath all of those past traumas, the pain points. And when he does, he suddenly becomes empowered in the present, and he's able to recognize some of the reasons why he acts, thinks, and behaves in certain ways. So the emotional healing process is just absolutely critical. Now, Dr. Ted Roberts did an incredible amount of work on this topic, and I was privileged to sit under him. And he would often share his own story. He had abusive stepfathers, and there was alcoholism in the home, and a lot of physical abuse, verbal abuse, etc. And a lot of men today they're just broken men seeking comfort. And there's no comfort to be found in porn because, again, it takes us deeper into our pain. But the healing ministry of the church is so critical here. Men need to get healed. And when they're healed, they have a better chance at addressing this issue and overcoming addictive behaviors.
Yeah. Do you want to grow and multiply your church? Perhaps you need help launching a new church or even a Christian ministry like a coffee shop or something else. Do you find yourself struggling just to recruit volunteers week after week? Is your church in need of new life? Maybe you're fresh out of seminary and the organizational leadership called you with an opportunity and you realize that opportunity needs a fresh start. Or perhaps you're a church planter. You've been going it alone for a while now and you're exhausted, lonely, and doubting your call. We understand. Church planting, launching a new church is hard. Missional Leadership Coaching is here to help. Go to missionalleadershipcoaching.com and click on our free offer to get started today. That's missionalleadershipcoaching.com. We look forward to helping you. Because the chemically what happens there, if I'm understanding correctly, the porn creates a dopamine response within the brain.
It does.
Which acts as almost like an analgesic. So it kind of numbs that pain short term because it releases all the endorphins and everything within the brain.
And serotonin and adrenaline. And chemically what's going on is it's an incredible, thrilling high, erotica, if you want to call it that. But then the problem is it's like jumping off of a cliff. And each time, you go deeper into the valley. and there's guilt, shame, and all kinds of misery, and you claw your way back out of that valley. And you get to a point where you start feeling like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. It didn't destroy me. It's not going to keep me down. And you get a little confident, and it isn't long. And, you seek that comfort again. And that's part of the addictive cycle. And a good counselor, and there are many who understand, addiction recovery, can help a man work through this process of emotional healing.
Yeah. Now, I do want to step back just a minute. And so you mentioned earlier, you said that the society, so you and I are talking about addiction here. And you're right. I have seen society begin to address the addiction more. What they don't address is casual use, though. And casual use is just as bad as addiction. It can lead to addiction, but there, we can casually use alcohol and not become addicted. The likelihood, though, that you can casually use porn and not become addicted is very low.
It's very low. It's very low. And definitely there's a distinction to be made between compulsive behavior, which is anxiety driven, and a full blown addiction where now we're talking about, actual chemical, something that's going on chemically, because you're addicted to the dopamine and the high and the adrenaline, etc. So there's a lot to go on, and I'm not, a licensed counselor or a clinician that can really, decipher all of the, the nuances that are there, though we need to be aware of them, and we need to make sure that we can defer to the professionals. And I think that there's a lot to be said there. The healing process, as we would all agree, is critical, but often neglected. Not a lot of people want to deal with the baggage. We have a whole generation of a traumatized youth, and they've been exposed again to pornography at the age of 9. They're seeing things graphically that are just, so damaging psychologically. So emotional healing, we're going to have to get better at it as a church. We need to be healing places. We need to create space for men to heal, men and women to heal from their past trauma. And, a lot of people want to slow down to do that because that takes time. That's messy. Do we really want to slow our ministry down because we want to keep growing? Well, we have to, because if we don't, these people go through life and they're broken, and compulsive behaviors and addictions will happen.
Yeah. And that gives me an opportunity to talk about one of the principles from church planting, as well as multiplication. And you've got to have a team around you of what you're doing. And so you talk about slowing down your ministry. Part of slowing down is building that foundation and building that team around you so that you have enough people around you that can help care for these people as they come in. Because again, when you're planting a church, you will get a lot of broken people that come in. In fact, the vast majority of people that will come to your church or that you will run across in your ministry there will be but those that are severely broken. Just because the established church, whether or not it is a fair assessment or not, can be debated. But the reality is the perception of the established church is we don't have room for the broken within our midst. What we want are the nice, and I shouldn't say well-heeled, but the difference between, I think, between some of the established church Christians and those outside the church is we've just learned to hide our sin a little bit better. And so it's not that we're better off, but we at least have that perception, and the pastor can go on and the board can go along doing their ministry without the interruption of having to actually do ministry, so to speak. I want to remind everyone, too, that Revitalize to Plant, reshaping the established church to plant churches, is available on Amazon or anywhere, Wolfenstock, anywhere you want to buy books, Books A Million, or you can go to book.revitalizetoplant.com, and there you can get a discount on for $15. I think it lists for $19 on Amazon. But I'll even pay the shipping through the USPS, United States Postal Service. I'll pay the shipping if you want to purchase it directly from me. Again, that's $15. It doesn't matter either way. But revitalizetoplant.com. And you all, it's been great being here. I appreciate it. Like and subscribe, if you will. A lot of people listen to this. We get about 2,000 downloads per episode. We're in the top 17% of all podcasts, which is great. This is just a testimony to people wanting to hear the story of God, and all that is good. But I'd encourage you to subscribe and then share it with your friends, because the subscriber base is what will help us get these voices out there, right? I've told you this is not about me. It cost me money to produce this podcast. I paid over $1,000 last year just in podcast promotion, production, and the tools to edit. The hosting of the podcast is not free. All these things, I'd encourage you to please like and subscribe, if you will. Thanks a lot. And that's the end of part 1. We'll release part 2 as a bonus episode later in the week. Remember to like and subscribe. Never miss an episode. You can be a co-creator with God by helping to echo our guest voices. Share our episodes with friends and family and on your own social media accounts. Give us positive 5-star reviews. The more positive reviews we have, the more visibility we have, and the more voices that are echoed through eternity. We often invite guests who are serving faithfully year after year, often in anonymity in their respective roles in ministries. God sees them, and the reality is for a good kingdom leader, that's enough. We do not do what we do for the accolades of humanity. We do it because we're called by God. But I believe that God uses people like you and I to continue those reverberations and echo them throughout eternity. You can partner with God by liking, subscribing, writing a quick positive 5-star review, and again, sharing those voices with friends and family and on your own social media accounts. Those reviews will eventually lead to other guests who have larger platforms that have more listeners, who will then in turn listen to the show. And again, it further echoes those voices, which is the whole vision of the Echoes Through Eternity podcast here, is to continue echoing those voices that God is echoing through eternity there. So like and subscribe and review us if you would. We'd appreciate that greatly.